Got to remember where we came from, or where I came from at least. We came from nowhere, really.
We were just like working class kids that lived in Finglas, Ballymun area, and that's all there was in the early 70s. We didn't venture any further than O'Connell Street.
Came from this place, this just grey concrete, lower middle class ghetto of non-culture. The thing I remember mostly about growing up is violence.
Well, I was just beaten up every day of the week. We couldn't get served in most pubs. The weird thing was we threatened blokes so much, but girls loved us. I tell you, it's a very, very cool thing. Wear a dress and every girl will love you, you know?
He always dressed like he was from Mars, and skinheads and boot boys used to find that a real affront. Out of that came Lipton Village. Lipton Village was our revenge on the arseholes that we felt very arrogantly that we were growing up with. Because that's what you do. You pretend you're better. So, for instance, we knew more about music, or we knew more about what was going on. That was our defense mechanism.
Lipton Village just came out of nowhere. I mean, it was just a group of like 8, 9 blokes that saw things differently. It was actually quite humorous. It was almost like sort of a Lord of the Flies in Ballymun, you know? We all had roles. I was in charge of being in charge. Googie was in charge of ignorance. Bono was judge and jury. Like, if we walked into a room, we'd command the attention visually, and Bono could do it differently. He had that charisma from word go.
I think people, you know, tend to define U2 according to the Joshua Tree and the kind of emotional openness and the direct appeal that U2 had in that phase. But they began as a very theatrical group with Bono acting out various characters. His on-stage persona was very consciously theatrically based, and quite a bit of that would have been to do with the influence that the Prunes would have had on U2.
I think when the punk thing happened in '76, and we all sort of found out that we could form bands, that you didn't actually have to know many chords. You could just get away with 2 chords, and you could borrow drum kits, and you could write your own lyrics. It sort of demystified the whole thing, because we thought it was all about Rory Gallagher and Van Morrison, who were like serious musos.
Then the Radiators from Space came out, television screen, which was a great single. That was a real inspiration to us.
I went to see the Radiators from Space, who I thought were the best, because they were really punk, you know. And what Chevron was doing with his lyrics, he was like bringing Dublin alive. He was almost like sort of a Johnny Rotten meets Brendan Behan for me. We couldn't get a gig anywhere, and it was the Project Arts Centre that almost became our home. And I mean, Jim Sheridan goes, "Yours are mad, yours are G. I'll put yous on, right?" And he was like, "Wow, thanks, Jim, giving us a gig, but do something mad."
The Project was like was the only place in Dublin where things could happen at that time. Like, it was even hard to go to a gig. So, you know, you'd go in the Project and you'd smell like somebody smoking hash and Christy Moore on the stage singing, and the next week it'd be the Radiators from Space or U2, you know, it was kind of wild.
The lease on project number 4 is also a short one, but the former printing warehouse is owned by the same group as the Olympia Theatre, and there's speculation that both may be acquired by Dublin Corporation.
The board decided to fix up the building, so their way of doing that was knocking down the building and knocking out everything, toilets and all that, and the place was closed, and I decided it had to reopen no matter what. So one day I just went in with white paint and painted the walls with my kids, and then we decided to do the dark space.
The organisers call it a dark space, and they've invited artists from Ireland and abroad to work in the derelict site.
And it was let me say, you learnt a lot about life doing the dark space event.
He works in the street. He makes these buildings for an imaginary civilization.
Yeah, I remember, I think it was like 1977, we were walking around the so-called Temple Bar area, and we walked in and we saw this man totally naked, rolling around in clay with sort of Indian paint on his face. And we stood there in awe for like an hour. Afterwards, he said he was crawling across the universe. So we went back, and suddenly we went, wow. So we started bringing that in.
We have a group with us tonight who are certainly young people. They're a young group who hail mainly from Dublin, and they are unique and different. There is no other group in the business doing what they're doing at the moment. What exactly they're doing, I'm not too sure, mind you, but there's nobody else doing it, and you have to make up your own mind. Would you welcome, please, the Virgin Prunes?
They weren't prepared to simply play punk by numbers. There was a determination about the Virgin Prunes that there should be another dimension to it. There was a real interest in theatre there and a real interest in art. That gave them a much more ambitious approach than would have been generally accepted within the punk movement on the one hand, or than would have been common in Ireland.
The cat was out of the bag in some ways culturally. You know, Ireland, a country which had been quite closed for so many years, was really starting to open up for the first time. And I think, certainly from our point of view, getting into a band was just a great way of sort of getting out.
I mean, I think that if you look at the number of acts that are signed by record companies or by international record companies, a very small proportion of those acts signed are successful, and that's just the nature of the business. It would not be possible for everybody who's signed to sell millions of records. It's just in the nature of things, one out of every 10 acts or one out of every 20 acts is going to make a significant impact.
I suppose that the Blades are the ones that I thought would come through and didn't. Paul Cleary, very good songwriter, I suppose didn't get the breaks.
There were a lot of good bands. The names will mean nothing to the vast majority of people now, but that shouldn't take away from what they achieved themselves, and also contributed in creating the kind of environment from which the likes of U2 and Sinead O'Connor could emerge.
The first 5 singles by the Blades, between about whatever it was, I don't know what it was, that must have been about 78 to about 81 or something like that. Those first 5 singles by the Blades were the first 5 singles by any band I've ever heard in my entire life. They were absolutely brilliant.
Who's that stranger? The bride wore white.
I think that what happened in Ireland, for a different reason, was happening in America and Britain. In other words, that whatever the kids in America were feeling, they wanted out of their little world. And they got out through drugs. The Ramones, Blondie, television, Johnny Thunder's Heartbreakers.
When punk rock groups like The Clash or the Sex Pistols perform, The hundreds of unemployed young people who go to their concerts and listen to their songs know that those songs are the story